Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the Waste Reduction District meeting on June 13th, Executive Director Tom McGlasson shared background information on the request to put out a request for proposals, also referred to as an RFP for recycling services.
We talked about this at the April meeting. It's something that staff and the executive committee have been discussing since December or January for a few months. And at the April meeting, the board did indicate that they would like to go ahead and see a draft agreement before making a decision on what to do with that. So there is that agreement. As indicated in the memo, it has been reviewed by legal counsel. The executive committee also reviewed it at their most recent meeting, I think that, this is something that, comes from the fact that we now have a second option in the county with Rumpke opening their new facility. The current agreement that we're operating under was entered into when there was really only one option for us in the county. And also entered into under certainly different market conditions, recycling market conditions than where we are today. Note for the record that our current agreement does call for us to be we have a fee for our recyclables, a per ton fee. I think is currently $26.40 per ton. I think there's some thought that, given the fact that we separate our material at the collection sites and with where the markets are for some materials, cardboard, in particular, is it something that we should be having to pay a company to take from us?
McGlasson cautioned that the overall cost might not decrease due to the price of fuel increasing.
In April, we provided some data related to cost projections and estimates based on market conditions for various materials. And, there are certainly scenarios within that where, we could generate enough revenue based on the, historical volumes that we have to potentially, offset that increase in fuel cost. There are also certainly scenarios within there if the market conditions go south, where we could be in a worse situation than we are currently. Not that we're in a bad situation right now, just financially, it would, going to cost us a lot more money.
Bloomington Mayor Carrie Thompson expressed concern that starting this process would not guarantee them a decrease in costs. She said if their current provider could increase the cost, then she would prefer to renew the contract rather than seek out a new one.
I guess I would lean towards this gives them an opportunity to increase prices, and if we're happy with the service and we think it's a net zero or close to net zero change, once we account for staff time and effort to prepare for an RFP, I would lean towards trying to renew the contract.
Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith pointed out that the new competition could help them obtain a better deal.
I think something to consider, of course, well, the whole reason we're considering this is that there is another big player in the game now with Rumpke. So my hope would be that we would get, through that competition, we might get a relatively good deal. Better than before. There was really another option as far as the whole contract. I think the way the RFP is written, also smaller entities and businesses could bid on part of the work. So we might, be able to piece together something that's more financially beneficial.
Piedmont Smith suggested that they continue their discussion of the RFP at their September meeting. During their June 12th meeting, the Bloomington City Council heard a resolution to protect people seeking gender-affirming care. Councilmember Courtney Daly, who co-sponsored the legislation, provided background on the resolution.
In April of 2023, Governor Holcomb signed into law SB 480, which was passed by the Indiana General Assembly. This bill prohibits physicians from providing gender-affirming treatments or procedures to minors, effectively banning Indiana youth from transitioning. It was set to become law on July 1st of that year, but the ACLU brought a class action lawsuit and received a temporary injunction, putting on hold this law until the case went to trial. However, the state appealed, and on February 27th of this year, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals stayed the injunction. That means that Senate Bill 480 went into effect the very next day, on February 28th of this year. No care could begin, and none could be continued. Minors who were currently receiving medical care needed to immediately find health care out of state or discontinue their health care altogether. So the Bloomington-Monroe County Human Rights Commission, in response, passed a resolution on gender-affirming care and passed it along to the council, asking us to support this and to recommend their resolution. According to the Human Rights Campaign, as of May 2024, 39%, or 117,600 trans youth aged 13 to 17 are living in the 25 states that have passed bans on gender-affirming care. They state, in a coordinated push led by national anti-LGBTQ+ hate groups, legislators across the country have overridden the recommendations of the American medical establishment and introduced hundreds of bills that targeted transgender, non-binary, and gender-expansive youth's access to age-appropriate, medically necessary care. Transgender youth are being erased. Access to gender-affirming care can literally be life-saving. Our children, all children, deserve a place to feel safe. As it is, transgender school kids can't necessarily feel safe in their own classrooms. The Indiana General Assembly is making sure of that. Indiana House Bill 1608 requires that teachers report their students wishing to use another name than what is on record. This is a dangerous and vindictive practice for students who don't feel safe coming out in their own homes. My husband spent the past 2 years as a theater arts high school teacher. He was required to dead name multiple students who were still exploring new identities, and this broke his heart. He wanted to be welcoming to all of his students, especially his most vulnerable ones, so he had to compromise. He made it known that he would call students by their last names instead. He could never really get to truly know the real them while he was their teacher. Our communities should not have to skirt such an important issue, such as a basic issue as identity. Social affirmation is a large part of affirming care for young people. The simple act of acknowledging and affirming a transgender or non-binary person's identity is enormously important. According to the Trevor Project's 2019 National Survey on LGBTQ youth mental health, 54% of transgender and non-binary youth reported seriously considering suicide in the last year, and 29% made a suicide attempt. But access to hormone therapy, hormone blockers, binders, etc., has proven to significantly reduce the risk of suicide in transgender youth ages 13 to 20. The JAMA Network, a group of 13 peer-reviewed journals published by the American Medical Association, tells us this. Transgender and non-binary youths are disproportionately burdened by poor mental health outcomes owing to decreased social support and increased stigma and discrimination. And that receipt of gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones, was associated with 60% lower odds of moderate or severe depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality over a 12-month follow-up.
Councilmember Daly then went on to describe the resolution for gender-affirming care.
So this resolution upholds the City of Bloomington's commitment to non-discrimination based on sex, gender, and sexual orientation as laid out in Bloomington City Ordinance 2.23.110. It also aligns with the vision statement of our city's comprehensive plan, where the first core principle enumerated is to fortify our strong commitment to equality, acceptance, openness, and public engagement. So I hope this evening that you will vote yes on Resolution 2414 and continue to uphold our city's reputation for being a welcoming and safe space and confirming Bloomington's inclusiveness and acceptance.
Bloomington and Monroe County Human Rights Commission Chair Ryan Shadday discussed the history of the city's efforts to advocate for the LGBTQ+ community. Shadday also called out council members Andy Ruff and Dave Rollo, who previously signaled via a memo that they would abstain from the vote.
In 1975, this body passed Ordinance 7567 by a vote of 5-0. This ordinance guaranteed civil rights for Bloomington citizens, regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or age. It was one of a few, first to do so in the entire country, based on sexual orientation. In fact, only a few dozen other cities in the entire country had passed a similar resolution by a year later. Naturally, the state of Indiana stepped in and decided that a local commission, like the BHRC, had too much independent authority, and in 1978, we lost the ability to investigate sexual orientation discrimination. In 1993, Ordinance 9328 sought to rectify that misdeed by the state, much as we are attempting to do here today. This ordinance passed 9-0, and it once again guaranteed equal opportunity regardless of sexual orientation. A lesbian nurse who spoke in favor of the ordinance at the public hearing stated medicine and democracy are a lot alike, and equal rights must be guaranteed to everyone. Also, only a symbolic gesture, much as this ordinance, it was a meaningful expression of support. In fact, respondents voluntarily cooperated with all 3 complaints of sexual orientation discrimination filed with the commission in that first year. While protecting against gender identity discrimination for transgender residents was briefly discussed, the BHRC commissioners did not opt to include those protections in the 1993 resolution, meaning we chose not to do the right thing then at an amazing time to do so. Nearly 20 years ago, in 2006, Mr. Ruff and Mr. Rollo, you said on this very body that unanimously passed Ordinance 0607, which forbade discrimination based on gender identity. The BHRC had been discussing adding gender identity as a protected class and doing legal research on how to accomplish it since 2004. In your comments that evening, Mr. Ruff, you stated, this ordinance did not protect behavior, but protected people from the behavior of others, from intolerance and incivility, exclusiveness, and discrimination, just as this ordinance attempts to do so today. You concluded that to not adopt this ordinance would protect the behavior of intolerance and discrimination. And Mr. Rollo, you stated that this ordinance...
To clarify that remarks should be addressed to the chair. It's okay to talk about the remarks that someone made, but rather than saying directly at you, just, yeah, sorry, thank you so much.
Mr. Rollo stated that this ordinance harms no one and hoped that it would help to advance fundamental civil rights and hoped that the debate had worked to advance tolerance for our community. While today's ordinance focuses a lot on health care, adequate health care is a fundamental right. No one should be discriminated against for obtaining quality health care that is a right for them. According to NPR, gender-affirming care for minors and adults is supported by all major U.S. medical and mental health associations. Finally, another instance of this body's support, and one of the latest in 2015, Ordinance 1528 was unanimously passed. The council and the mayor wanted to extend full protection to the categories of sexual orientation and gender identity, thereby removing the voluntary nature of investigation and mediation of complaints based on those categories, helping to absolve the state's derelict for these communities once more, right here in our own community. That year, it was stated by Mr. Rollo that the ordinance was historic, and he was looking forward to the day that we lived in a community free from prejudice and discrimination. Council members, today you have a chance to once again make historic progress for Bloomington.
During public comment, local resident London Montgomery encouraged the council to pass the legislation for gender-affirming care.
Good evening. My name is London Montgomery. My pronouns are she, her, and it is a joy to be here tonight to celebrate the resolution to protect individuals seeking gender-affirming care. I believe it is very easy to become disengaged and resigned to fear, and instead you have made the joyful choice to stand up and celebrate justice, change, and hope, all of which begins at home. Addressing a concern in last night's addendum, which believes that the resolution has been fast-tracked, I encourage the Council to celebrate our city's Human Rights Commission, who in a 7-0 unanimous vote agreed to present this resolution for adoption on January 22nd, 2024, 141 days ago. The addendum includes concerns over the validity of WPATH, an organization whose guidelines ensured I was able to receive life-saving care. As in the addendum quote, are strong supporters of the LGBTQ community and fully supports transgender people and acknowledge they can lead happy and fulfilling lives. Thank you. I encourage the Council to celebrate the following statement by the HRC. Gender-affirming care has always existed and isn't a new phenomenon. People who begin transition during childhood, who work closely with parents and healthcare providers to determine which changes are age-appropriate and are in the best interest of the child. And that every single major medical organization, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the American Psychiatric Association, supports the provisioning of age-appropriate, gender-affirming care. The addendum suggests we cannot trust reports on transgender youth suicide because the sample sizes are too small. I would like to make the Council aware of two reports. First, the Trevor Project, as previously stated, in 2024, 49% of young transgender individuals seriously considered suicide in the past year. 1 in 7 attempted suicide. Over 18,000 LGBTQ individuals responded. Second, the 2022 U.S. Transgender Survey, with a sample size of 92,329 transgender people in the United States, which shows that over 97% of those surveyed are satisfied and very satisfied with their gender affirmation surgery and hormone replacement therapy, and the Council may count me as one of them. Finally, I encourage everyone here to celebrate the City Council's history of standing on the right side of justice. In 2017, your City Council passed Resolution 1713, whereas Americans deserve health care that enables their children to grow into their full potential. Section 1 states, the Bloomington City Council opposes any and all attacks on our health benefits. That resolution passed unanimously. At last week's 4th Street Festival, I saw many artists and patrons, and I was reminded of tonight's resolution and that it is for and by the people that live here, of all ages and identities, and that Bloomington, at its most beautiful, is a celebration. Tonight is a celebration.
After extensive public comment and concluding remarks from council members, the council voted 9-0 in support of the resolution. The Monroe County Council met on June 11th. Council President Trent Deckard noted that the American Rescue Plan Act fund deadline is approaching, and they have a year to decide where to spend the funds.
We do have continued ARPA requests on here. I would remind folks that we have a June 20th joint session with the county commissioners to talk about ARPA. As I said in the last meeting, while no action is anticipated for this evening, I encourage all counselors, those here, those not here, to think exhaustively and expeditiously about anything with ARPA you want to bring up, have discussed, or start moving in that meeting with our partners, the commissioners. And just to remind the public, for action on ARPA items, it takes agreement of both bodies. And so that's why we've been doing joint meetings towards that. We also are working under a very tight timeline in that here in the next year, we have to make decisions about where things will go. The dollars have to be expended by the end of next year and follow those tight guidelines, or the auditor will tell us we are in a lot of trouble and we don't want that. So again, counselors, think expeditiously and expansively about what should be in that discussion if you feel like there's something that's not had any discussion. And I'll just remind publicly here what I've talked with Michelle and all of our staff on both our end and the commissioners end. Really, we need to look exhaustively about what we've not done, what might be lingering, what communications have come in, et cetera. And again, exhaustively, expansively, or efficiently.
Councilmember Kate Wiltz said that she has qualms with the county commissioner's assignment of the council to determine the size and bed count of a potential new jail.
I have some things I'd like to talk about with respect to the jail and in the sheriff's office, and I am their liaison, one of two. And I have been thinking a lot about the meetings that were held by the commissioners over the last week or so regarding the location. And while the location is the purview of the commissioners, what I hadn't fully appreciated, I suppose, is that they intend for the council to be more involved in determining the size or bed count of the facility. And you know, I appreciate being involved in decision-making generally. I feel that the instruction was to work with the sheriff, and by all means, I would defer to the sheriff in those areas of expertise in a lot of cases. I'm a little concerned that we weren't. This seems to be a change from previous operations on this topic and previous understandings of where our lanes are. So I guess the other part that concerns me is that we have asked to receive more information just to be kept apprised of what's going on in terms of that information gathering phase that we're in with our consultants. You know, we've seen reports, of course, and we invited our representative from DLZ to give an update to council at our meeting, I believe at our last meeting. And he declined, saying that he worked for the commissioners and therefore was not permitted to discuss things with us at our meeting. And I find that troubling. I'm encouraged that we'll be able to maybe hear from Corey Grass on the sheriff's side of things. I think these are the types of things that frustrate me and serve as huge stumbling blocks to the collaborative approach that is so very necessary across the Board of Judges, the council, the commissioners, and the sheriff's office at a bare minimum. And I think we worked through a lot of this during JFAC. And at no point during JFAC was anyone that and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone was under the impression that we were choosing the number of beds.
Absolutely.
Wiltz then outlined her recommendations, saying the council needs to make sure it watches its spending of local income tax funds.
So I have a couple of recommendations / thoughts. And the first is that I think that JFAC should probably call a meeting in the next couple months to look at a little bit more specifically some of these cost items that we know are going to be coming at us, and maybe even to talk a little bit with the sheriff's department on considerations for bed count and get maybe in that spirit of collecting information and input. Also, I really feel strongly that we should be able to receive updates either directly or indirectly on the information being gathered from our county departments right now. And it almost feels as though there's an intentional block there, and I'm not sure I understand it. In the meantime, the people collecting that information, the contracts paying for that, are coming from money that we appropriated. This is coming from money that we appropriated last year when we were looking at purchasing the Fullerton Pike property. And
Public money.
Yeah, this is public money. This is money collected from our residents, from our taxpayers. It is our responsibility to be very careful with that money and to ensure that it is being spent wisely and in the best interest of all members of our community. What I'm proposing is that we advertise for a deappropriation of that fund, which is the ED Lit fund. We have to advertise for 3 weeks. We can't just vote and do it, and that's fine. But until or unless we are given some access to information to aid in moving this forward quickly, I feel like we need to retain some control over the spending.
Councilmember Jennifer Crossley said that she agrees with Wiltz's proposal for deappropriation of funds. She explained that she does not believe that the county council should be responsible for bed counts at the jail.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councilor Wiltz's comments. And as another member of the Justice Fiscal Advisory Committee, that's a part of the process, right? So I think that we have to do. We can talk the talk, but can we walk the walk? And right now, it does feel like it was, and I wasn't able to attend those listening sessions because of prior engagements that were already made on my end, and I couldn't change those. However, in listening to and watching the CATS recordings, it was a little bit surprising to hear that we are responsible for certain things, but there was one particular body of government that was not, in my mind, I don't think is included in this conversation, and I think it is the judges. I don't think that we can say that it is up to us personally and the sheriff's office personally need to figure out, how many bed counts are we supposed to have. So that, that's a great deal of responsibility, but I don't think that that is our particular responsibility, so to speak. It is disheartening to hear certain things come out in meetings, and instead of us having these conversations more collaboratively as we preach, as we continue to say we want to do things collaboratively. Well, this is our perfect prime opportunity to do this because the community is watching. The community has continued to ask. It is a big job. It is a big deal. It is extremely frustrating to be sitting in this seat now when we've known for a very long time that we have needed this new justice facility. And so I'll hold my comments on other things until our end, but to comment on what is being said, I would definitely wholeheartedly agree for the deappropriation. So we can sit down and have come to Jesus conversations as to what are we doing with taxpayers' dollars and how we can really move seriously and move expeditiously towards a new facility and funding that. We might have our particular lane of financing. However, we all have to intersect at some point, and I don't think that it is incumbent just on the sheriff's office or our office or even the commissioner's office, for example, for us, for one particular body of government to do one particular thing. It is all of us. We are county electeds, and we need to act accordingly, and this is our way of doing so.
Wiltz clarified that her intentions behind the deappropriation are to look more closely at each item rather than fund the project in a general sense.
I want to clarify that I'm taking this opportunity, I think, to put something in motion that doesn't have to run down the hill and get away. It gives us the opportunity to take a look at that. And I agree that we need to. I'm not trying to derail progress that's underway. I'm not trying to defund a contract and specifically, but my recollection is that we said, hey, here's a chunk of money to go forth and do jail purchasey things, including the property. I would like to take a much closer look at that and advertise for deappropriation.
And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.